Hi, we are so excited to write some defiant dialogue and monologues and maybe even poems with Raquel Almazan, joining us from Spain. First, you are in for a reading from her play La Paloma Prisoner. You are also in for a craft talk where they go into a bit of their journey as an artist, as a writer, as an activist, and then we will get to write. From there, we'll end with a Q&A, and without further ado, I will pass it over to Raquel.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, everyone at Girls Right Now. So thrilled to be in this community this evening. What an opportunity to be in the space together. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight to share my work, my journey, and to hear the urgent work that we're going to be creating together. As a young writer, the first concept that I understood that females had power is when I was living in a domestic violence shelter. When I was, I think, the age of many of the mentees, I was 14, 15 years old. And I had never, no one had ever asked me what I wanted to achieve in life. And so when I was in this domestic violence shelter, we had these storytelling circles, and I didn't quite fully understand and grasp the power of storytelling until I was in that circle with women that were a variety of ages, from children to women in their 60s and 70s. Hearing the stories of other women that were also experiencing domestic violence really inspired me to lean into, storytelling. What is this power of telling one story and hearing each other's stories? I did become incredibly interested in that moment in narrative. And I realized at that moment that unless I started writing my own stories, someone else was going to write my story for me. I think I approach writing every play as if I'm in a circle with women, and I'm hearing stories, but I'm also very conscious of reflecting back the narratives of women and not leaving us in a place of defeat. I was very exhausted by watching these narratives where at the end women were just defeated, or how many Hollywood narratives do we see that women are just dead at the end? And so this kind of taking back my ownership of my own agency in my own body, I developed a character called the Virgin Stripper, and I performed this piece in different places in the country. And what was fascinating, Valentina, is that there was never one time where I didn't perform that monologue and wasn't physically attacked. I started just making my awareness that the language again was so brutal and was calling out the rape culture, and I was, basically calling in my oppressor and my adversary in such a way that was very. They had not seen women. They were like, they hadn't seen women behave with this kind of, or take ownership of language in that way. I think one of the first questions I ask myself with characters is, what is their relationship to themselves? So a lot of times we think about female characters, we always think about, they're in relationship. Most of the time, female characters are in relationship to like their father or their husband, right? I always think about, what is their relationship to themselves and how does their inner thoughts sound like? And so when I start thinking about how do women actually talk to themselves, as I can usually try to find, I was like, this is how this character would speak to herself. So now it's time to move into our first prompt. I realized as I was writing these narratives that each of the relationships that I had, in Miami, it was such a diverse reality, but for me it was like being in Latin America, because I had friends that were from Ecuador, from Honduras, from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from Nicaragua, from Costa Rica, right? And that every single one of our narratives had a very specific nuance. And I felt that in the United States, they just lumped all Latinos together, right? And I said, no, our history is so specific to the narratives of each of these countries. So when I started writing, I realized that all of these issues were interconnected, that the reason why people were trying to leave Dominican Republic was also because of the conditions that were connected to Haiti, and then how that connected to Cuba, right? So all of these histories, and I said, okay, this is a much larger project, and I realized that I needed to devote time, a piece for each country. The histories were united, but then also I wanted to examine what was the relationship between specifically Mexico and the United States, and Nicaragua and the US, right? So looking at the relationships between all of the Latin American countries and the United States. So I have only written 8 out of the 33, and yes, it's true. Writing, and then the development of these plays also involves performance, because I developed the writing by entering into workshops, doing community readings, doing workshops with actors, directors. So I know it's going to be a 40-year process. I think writing as a young person, you need a collective. I think if you have even one other person to hold you accountable, to share that story, because the thing about writing is that it's meant to be shared. And many times as a young writer, we need that reinforcement of being heard. Always be in relationship to writing, and then also be generating writing. I say always have a book on you. Always have a list of 5 plays or 5 books or 5 things that you want to read. And I think it's really important as young writers to have someone else to hold you accountable. If you have a friend that says, "Did you write your pages this week?" And so, "I didn't write my pages." Okay, right? Having someone else to bounce off of, I think is really wonderful, because we know how challenging it is to find supportive spaces.
Please feel free to unmute yourselves and give a round of applause to Raquel for joining us tonight. And we are so grateful for you for bringing us all together to write through some conflict and get that out into the world.